Good afternoon, Homes Road Church of Christ. Hope you're having a great Wednesday in the Lord. I just want to bring a little devotional thought to you. Hope to encourage you along your way. In James 1:27, James tells us, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. That's James 1:27. Christians who want to be pure and faultless and want to be that way described by God, we need to look after others who need family. Many of us have our own family, but there are people out there who don't have a family. Maybe their husband died and they're left alone. Maybe the parents died in a car wreck and kids don't have a family. People need family. Having a family is a great need for humans. And the wonderful thing about family is it doesn't have to be blood related. You can have family without having to be blood related. When I think about this concept, I remember a movie called The Blind Side. Have you ever seen this movie? It's a few years old now, but when it came out, I just loved it and been a fan of the movie ever since. But it was in 2009, a 2000 film called The Blind Side. It depicts a true story about a guy by the name of Michael Orr. He's a famous NFL player, played for years for Baltimore Ravens. But in the movie, it's a true story. In the movie, Michael Orr was a homeless teenager. In this very wealthy family, they made their money in the Taco Bell franchise, but there's a very wealthy family that takes him in and helps him overcome learning difficulties and helps him to achieve excellence in the sport of football. In one particular scene in that movie that's really heart-touching, it's funny, you laugh, but at the same time it's very touching. But in this one scene, the family has decided to accept Michael Orr into their family and adopt him. And so they call Michael Orr in, they're having a meal together, and the family's talking with Michael about the possibility of adopting him after he had been living with them already for several months. And in a very sweet part of this movie, in a very sweet and tender reply, Michael exclaims, "I thought I already was a part of the family." I love that little line. I love that scene. It's a very beautiful moment. And adoption is a beautiful thing. Adoption of a person who needs a family is a beautiful, heartwarming thing. Love is extended and full inclusion is offered as a family opens its arms to a new member. Adoption changes lives, just as it profoundly changed Michael Orr's life. For us Christians, we will go through the same thing. In Jesus, baptized believers are made children of God through faith in Him. Galatians chapter 3, verse 26 says, "So in Christ Jesus you are all children of God through faith." We're adopted by God and become His sons and His daughters. Go to Galatians chapter 4 and look at verse 5. In that one it says, in that verse, Paul writes in chapter 4, verse 5, "To redeem those under the law that we might receive adoption to sonship." So we're adopted and we become His sons and His daughters. In verse 6 of Galatians 4, it says, "Because you are His sons," because you've been adopted, because you are His sons, God sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, "Abba, Father." As God's adopted children, we receive the Spirit of His Son, and we have the privilege, we have the gift to call Him Father. And we become His heirs and His co-heirs with Christ. That's the next verse. In Galatians 4, verse 7 says, "You are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are a child, God has made you also an heir." You get to receive the blessings of God when in His family. Romans 8, verse 17 says it this way. It says, "Now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in His sufferings, in order that we may also share in His glory." Christians, when we are baptized into Him, we become full members of His family. When Michael Orr was adopted in the movie and in real life, it changed his life. It changed his whole life pattern. He went from someone who was going to be destined to be a bum in the hood to having an incredible future. That's what adoption can do. It changes lives. It changes identity. It changes futures. How much more of us who are adopted by God? Our life changes when we know Him as Father. Our identity changes when we belong to Him. Our future changes as we are promised the glorious eternal inheritance of heaven. What could be a better adoption? And so therefore, God challenges us in 127, since God did all that for you, then maybe you should do the same. That's why He says religion that is pure and faultless is to look after orphans and widows, because God gave you a family. He made you an heir. He accepted you and adopted you into His family. So you do it to other people who also need family. And that is my message to you today. I hope it has been encouraging. I hope you'll be reaching out there and providing family for those who need it. We'll see you soon, Rome's Road. Bye-bye.